focusing only on your project. And there's a star, and the star is to raise the question, who's the star of your project? Who's the star? Is your project the star? Is your company the star? Or is government the star? Well, quite often when you ask this question from a business owner, they say that our company or our project is the star. And look, they may have been there for 10 or 20 years. It might have been their baby. They're really keen to get this funds for their project. But the thing is, the government is trying to achieve broader objectives. So they're more focused on achieving the national benefits. And the reason that they provide the money in the first place is to achieve those benefits. It doesn't really matter if they fund your project or someone else's project. So if you make your project the star, you're probably really not going to score very high on the criteria. So what you have to do is you actually have to make the government the star. You have to show how they're going to benefit. For example, by increasing employment, by promoting your industry, R&D, and other spillover effects. So that when the grant assessors they actually look at this, they see that you're providing a benefit to the whole community. And it's not just you, your company that will benefit. So that means you need to get a lot of letters of support, you need to have a consultation process, and most of all, you have to minimize risk to the government, as we all know with the pink bags example. The less riskier you can make the project, the easier it is to say yes. So make the government the star of your project. Okay, number 5, missing the early grant rounds. And what happens is funding quite often is provided in years. For example, there's $100 million over 4 years, and that's divided, that's $25 million a year. Potentially there's 2 rounds per year. So that's $12.5 million. Now what happens with companies is they probably don't even hear about this program in the first couple of rounds because 1, they're busy working on their projects. 2, they might have heard, but they're not sure whether to apply or not. Or 3, they don't think that they'll actually be eligible for it. So what that means is they skip a couple of rounds, which is really a big loss to them. Why? Because everyone's in the same boat. Yet at the same time, you still have those rounds. So if no one applies for the first 2 rounds, it's actually easier for you to get the funding, assuming you meet the eligibility criteria. So in the program that I was recently involved in, there were very few, called the Green Building Fund, there were very few applicants in the first couple of rounds, but by the time you got to the 5th and 6th round, everyone heard about it, and everyone was applying. So if you can, it's important to apply in the earlier rounds. And if you are unsuccessful, you still have the option of applying in the later rounds. But it's just there's money sitting there, and companies, because they're a little bit risk averse, they're not taking advantage of it. And the last point here, grants can actually be withdrawn at any time. So you might be preparing for your application for a particular grant, you might have built a relationship with a government department, you're about to submit it, and then you realize that the funding has been withdrawn. And that happened with a person that called us recently. They had a relationship with a government department for a year, they were getting everything ready, and then the election came along, the funding was withdrawn, and they didn't get anything. That's it. It's gone. And that actually happened a long time, many times. So if you apply in the earlier rounds, you actually minimize the chances of that happening. Not only is there more money available, but also there's money available, as opposed to the funding being suspended or withdrawn. All right. Number 6, ignoring the application forms provided. Now, this seems like a very silly thing to do, but until you actually look at some of those application forms, you won't understand why. See, the thing is, because the government wants to maintain a very fair process, all the forms, they have to look identical. So what typically happens is they lock down the forms. They ensure that you can't edit them, you can only put in information. Now, invariably, there are some bugs in the mechanism, and we will experience this, where you put in a date and then the numbers reverse themselves, and you touch your mouse into the field and then reverse themselves again. So it's very frustrating. In fact, often we tell our clients not to touch the form. So what's the solution? A lot of people that just take the information and they just write it in a Word document. They do it themselves, they have no problems, they can use a spell checker, easy, and then they submit it. Now that's a really, really big no-no. It's a big no-no because the government provided these forms to use for a specific reason, because they want to be fair and all the forms look the same. So if you're not using the forms provided, you're actually not following instructions. Quite often they even have page number limits. So if you use some other format, potentially you're trying to circumvent the system. So that's why you should always use the forms provided. Now, if you use a Mac, that also poses a problem because it changes the formatting at times. We had 2 clients who downloaded the program, the application form on a Mac, and it totally changed the formatting. So what do we recommend? We actually recommend doing the forms in your Word document, but when you finish, actually copy and pasting into the original form. Yes, it is very frustrating, but not as frustrating as not getting the money. You can be very sure of it. And 7, we're almost there. Underestimating the amount of work involved. Now businesses, they're really good at doing their activities. Over time they develop the processes, they have systems, everything is streamlined. They know what to do, it's all easy. Now when it comes to applying for grant applications, it's actually a totally different ballgame. You have different application forms, you have guidelines. It's something that they're not familiar with. So what do? They usually push it away, they delegate it to someone lower in the organization, or more likely, they leave it till the last minute. But what happens is we're always optimistic about our ability to produce work, and we always downgrade the amount of work involved. So what happens is everything is left till last minute, and from experience, 80 hours of work, it just can't be condensed into 4 20-hour days. People have tried to do it, it doesn't work. Very often, the process becomes overwhelming, and the quality actually suffers. And a lot of times, people just give up at all. So do as much as you can, and especially assess the amount of work involved so you can make the go, no-go decision. Do you even start the application process, or do you decide that it's just too much work? Overview, I've told you about the 7 common grant mistakes and how to avoid them. I've provided the resources, grant solutions that come to you, and I briefly mentioned the current grants and entitlements. And according to my watch, it's 4:51. So there we go, we're in time.